This video we're going to be looking at making models with 3D Studio Max for our Unity projects. 3D Studio Max is a very powerful modeling application. As students and educators, we have access to it for free. It's very capable. It does a whole lot more than what we're going to be looking at it for. But the intent of these videos is going to be if I'm a game developer, if I'm working on a game project, and I need a model very quickly, very simply, and I can't find what I'm looking for on the asset store, and I don't have a modeler working on the team, and I just want to make the model myself. So we're going to be looking at how to use 3D Studio, how to get around some of the basics of the interface, how to create primitive objects, how to edit those objects, and how to put materials on those objects. And the entire focus is going to be working towards taking our 3D objects and putting them into Unity. So we'll have a video on after I create the materials, how do I export the object into Unity, and then once I get into Unity, what do I do with it? So we'll be looking at 3D Studio Max. If you're interested in Blender, there's a lot of the same concepts. It's just the buttons are going to be called something different. The buttons will be in a different place. So, starting off with 3D Studio Max, here is the basic interface of what we'll be working with. I'm using 3D Studio Max 2018, but there's 2019, 2020. The user interface hasn't changed dramatically in years for 3D Studio Max. They add some interesting features, and they take away some stuff, but especially the stuff that we're going to be looking at, has remained largely unchanged since the very beginning. It's probably not going anywhere. So we take a look at the interface. It's got 1,000 scary-looking buttons on it, and each one of these buttons opens up another dialog that has 1,000 scary buttons on it. But the ones that we're going to be interested in most, we'll start up here with the transform tools. So I have a translate tool, I have a rotate tool, and I have a scale tool. So it's the same transforms from any other 3D application, position, orientation, size. A lot of these other tools over here, we don't necessarily have to worry about. We're not going to be looking at doing a bunch of stuff with splines or doing a lot of stuff with Max Script, or we're not going to be doing any rendering, not going to be looking at any lights. I mean, 3D Studio is a very powerful modeling and animation and game design tool, and purposes of what we're going to be looking at, we're just going to be skimming the surface of it. Over here on this side, I have these different tabs that expand into this panel. I have a Create tab, I have a Modify tab, I have a Pivot tab, which we're going to be using some of this stuff. Some of these things like the Scene Editor and some of these utilities, we're not going to worry about those. We're going to focus primarily on the Create and Modify tabs. Now, if I'm looking at the user interface down here, I've got these different views, and this is the default layout, right? So I've got a top view where I'm looking top down. I have a front view and a left view, and then I have a perspective view. Now, in each of these views, I can grab this little gizmo in the corner and sort of drag my view around and see changes to it. Like if I want my front view to look like the top view, I can grab this corner up here, click on the word top, and now this view matches up with that view over there. If I needed that for whatever reason, I could do that. Or I can switch it back to the front. There's also keyboard shortcuts for these views. So if I wanted this view, I could hit T for top, and I go up to the top. I can hit F for front. I can also right-click on some of these and go to different views if I've set up a camera, for instance. The other thing that I can do is I can select any of these views, and if I click on this button down here in the extreme lower right-hand corner, it'll maximize that one view, and now I've got only that view. And sometimes this is the way I prefer to work. I can also rotate my perspective view around by clicking on this little button right next to the maximize viewport toggle, and look at my modeling from any particular direction. The point where these two black lines cross is the origin of my scene. So that point right there is 0, 0, 0. Now, one thing that I could do with these transforms that I have, I can click on it, and then I get a very similar kind of gizmo that I see from Unity, right? So the axes are highlighted, and I can drag them along one of the axes, or I can click on one of these little corner squares and move my model around in two directions. It's very similar to the way Unity's gizmo works. But if I right-click on any of these, then I get this neat little transform type in here. And I can explicitly type in the coordinates that I want this model to move to. And if I right-click on these fields, it automatically sets it to the minimum value. So the easiest way to do, if I want my model centered on the origin, I usually start off this way, is I create my model and right-click on the transform tool, and then right-click on each of these fields, set them all to 0, and now my model is centered and located at the origin, and the pivot point's going to be in a nice place. That's nice. Okay, so I'll delete that model really quick and show you how to create something. So the first thing that I'm going to be looking at is this Create tab over here. And if I look under my Create tab, I have several more options. I have geometry and shapes and lights and cameras and helpers and space warps and systems and a bunch of stuff that we're not really going to look at. We're going to start off by looking at standard primitives. Now if I drop this down, I've got a bunch more of different types of primitives. Compound objects are objects that are made by grouping other objects together. And there's particle systems and grids and NURBs and all sorts of things that we're really not going to get into, because a lot of this deals with Max being my final platform. I'm going to do my rendering in Max, going to do my animation in Max, but we're going to use Max just for the stuff that we need it to, and once we get it to a point, our work is going to move over to Unity. So a lot of this stuff just doesn't apply to us if that's our goal. So we'll go back up to standard primitives, and then we'll see boxes, cones, tubes, pyramids, whatever. So I can start with a simple box, and I click 2 points, drag up, and I see over here that I've got a space where I could put units in. So there is a 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter square cube. I can also change the number of segments on each side. So if I want my box, say, to have, and then I'm going to click on this. So edged faces allows me to see the edges of the polygons of my selected object, and so now I can see that my box has 3 faces on each side, and I can specify however many faces I want my box to have. That's because it's still a box primitive, and some of these primitives, like sphere, like if I create a sphere, I'm going to have parameters that I can modify, such as the radius of my sphere and the number of segments that it has in it, depending on how I want that sphere to look. And if I go over to the Modify tab, I still see these objects in my scene here. If I go over to the Modify tab, then I get the same controls that I had when the object was first being created. So at first I see these controls under the Creation tab, and then very soon after the object is created, I get them back by going over to the Modify tab. And the Modify tab is where I have the chance to change any of these parameters, the size, the width, the number of faces, how many segments, whatever. But we're really not going to do a whole lot of modeling with these primitives. The primitives are really just a starting point. What we're going to be working with most of the time in 3D Studio Max as we're making our models for Unity are going to be editable meshes. So I'm going to convert these objects into something that is called an editable mesh. It's a mesh that I can edit. In Max, I have access to the individual faces, the polygons, the vertexes, all of the things that make up that mesh, and I can move them around individually. So that's how I make changes to the model inside of Max. To make something that is a primitive, like we'll start with this box here, to turn it into an editable mesh, I select it, and then I right-click on it. And down at the bottom of that context menu, I see Convert To, and then I have several options on what I can convert it to. Convert it to an editable mesh. And there it is. It's now no longer a box. It is a mesh that is in the shape of a box. But I don't have any controls over it in terms of adding segments or faces to each side or nice little parameters that I can use to control the size of it. Now my Modify panel over here looks a whole lot different. Now that I've got this box converted into an editable mesh, I have access to all the different parts of this mesh, all the individual components, the vertexes, the polygons. I can select which one I want to work at, which level I want to work at down here. So I can, at the high end, I have the entire element, right? So an object can be made up of several large elements. In this case, the entire box is its own element. Or I can work on individual polygons. Or I could work on individual triangles. Or I can work on individual edges. Or I can go all the way down to each individual vertex. And by selecting any of these things, I can click on them and drag them around. Scale them up, select multiples, and scale them up or scale them down. And sometimes I'm going to work on the polygon level, sometimes I'm going to work on the vertex level. Those are the two that I use most commonly. I rarely do anything with faces or edges or elements. Sometimes I'll want to add multiple objects together into a single editable mesh, in which case I'll be creating multiple elements. Or I can take the elements out, make them into their own objects, and work on them individually. A lot of the stuff that I use most often is down here under the polygon mode. Extrude and bevel. So I've got this box, but it's still roughly box shaped, right? So how do I change it into something that's not quite so box shaped? I'm going to scale down that one face a little bit, and then I can do stuff like extrude. So if I check the extrude button and click on that face and drag the mouse a little bit, then it extrudes that face up. It creates new faces where it needs to, and it moves that face in a particular direction. And now my box is decidedly not box looking. I can also do a negative extrusion, so I can actually extrude the face down back into the model. Sometimes that looks a little chunky or clunky. Or bevel is like a two-step extrude, because the first click does the extrusion, and then after I release the click, I can drag it to change the scale. So it's sort of a two-step extrude and scale. And I can also bevel down into my object as well. And we'll take a look at that. So already I've taken my box and turned it into something that's got a little more character to it. Something that I can do on the edge level is I can select multiple edges, and just like I can bevel faces, I can chamfer edges, which inserts faces where it needs to create a chamfer sort of effect. Now watch what happens if I come back over to the polygon, and now I'm selecting faces that have another face in between them. And now if I bevel these, the individual faces move off in different directions. And I can make something that's much more tree-like. I can also rotate these faces to give them sort of a curved look. I want to make like a branching tree or something like that. I want to do that again down here on the base. And I'm just doodling with this. I've got no design for this object to do or be anything in particular. I'll select these faces down along the base of this. One of the things that's really going to be hard for you to get used to is the way 3D Studio navigates its view as opposed to the way that Unity does. If I've been working in Unity for a while, a lot of times I'll come over to 3D Studio and I'll hold down the right mouse key and start fiddling with the WASD keys, and can't figure out why my camera's not moving anywhere. Just because the camera navigation in 3D Studio is done completely differently. Alright, so there's sort of an introduction into, basic 3D editable mesh kind of modeling, in that I can start with something as simple as a square, and by extruding and beveling and twisting and moving individual faces and polygons and edges, I can create different sort of shapes with it. One other thing I want to talk about in terms of basic modifications of geometry. If I come over here and I've got this modifier list, this modifier tab actually has got a bunch of stuff in it. And we're going to be looking at the modifiers and modifier tab, well, at least a couple of them. And these are all the things that I can do to this mesh. Everything that's in this list is something that can be applied. Now, not all of them work very well, and not all of them are particularly useful for us. Some of them generate some very high polygon count models. Like if I click on Mesh Smooth, now it is sort of smoothed out my shape and made it a lot more organic looking. But it's using a NURBS type of model that, if we convert this over to Unity, is going to turn into a lot of faces. Well, that's not quite so many faces. I don't know why I would particularly need it to look this way, but if I wanted to, there it is. As I add modifiers to this modifier list, let's say I want to, and we're going to be talking about materials and mapping in a little bit, but we'll put a UV map on it. Maybe I want to give it some twist. And then at any particular time I want to, I can right click on it and go to convert turn it back into an editable mesh, and now I've got a basic, straightforward piece of mesh geometry that I can work with, or export, or do whatever I wanted to. It's actually looking kind of cool. I don't need this sphere here. Let's get rid of that. Probably the only other useful thing to mention in this introductory video is that I can attach multiple objects together. I can create duplicates very quickly. Oh, I can think of something else I want to talk about. By holding down the Shift key, and then if I do any transform with the Shift key held down, it'll create a copy. And then I have a choice to create a copy, an instance, or a reference. A copy is its own thing. It's a new, completely new object that just happens to look identical to another object over there. An instance is it's an instance, right? So it's not exactly a copy. It's saying, hey, I'm another one of those, and anything that happens to that one happens to me. So if I create an instance of this and I change its scale, or I apply a material to it, or I start moving stuff around on it, then the instance is going to immediately reflect the changes that occur to the original. If I make it a copy, then it's its own thing. And maybe I'll make 2 or 3 other copies of this. And now I want to add them all together into a single object. On any of them, I'll see this option over here to attach or attach list. If I click on attach, then I can just add them all together. If they have different materials, I can add objects together to make an elaborate object that has multiple materials on it. That is not a problem. Unity handles it just fine. But if I'm attaching things and they have different materials, then Max will throw up this dialog saying, match materials to sub-object materials, and just tell it yes. Just tell it yes, and everything will work fine. But you'll see that object every time I try to attach objects that have different materials assigned to them. These all have the same material, so it's not going to matter. So I think that's about it for our introduction to 3D Studio Max. The next video we're going to look at adding materials to our objects, building stuff off of reference photos, and then exporting those objects out to Unity.